Hi out there. This is Heather Vickery, and you've tuned in to the Brave Files podcast. Welcome. I'm so happy to have you here with us today. I'm curious, how many of you out there feel like there's a story inside of you? Maybe that story could help others. Do you ever wonder that? Or that perhaps in the telling of your own story, you might find healing for yourself that can then transfer to others, or maybe not. Well, that's exactly what happened to my friend and fellow podcaster, Ronit Plank. Ronit tells me that she never intended to write a memoir, but as a professional writer, she realized that her own personal story was too important to keep to herself. Her recently published memoir, which is called When She Comes Back, is riveting and powerful. I personally listened to it on audiobook because I love Ronit's peaceful and comforting voice. There's really a cadence and a rhythm to it that almost felt meditative to me. And I learned so much from my interview with Ronit that I can't wait to share it with you. Her personal brave journey offers so many insights, if you look for them, that can help you connect with your own ways to step bravely into the world. Tuck fear in your pocket and take it with you and go out and do brave things. So I'm really excited to share this one with you. Let's get started.
Hope, change, courage.
This is Heather Vickery, and you're listening to The Brave Files, stories from people living courageously. When we choose bravely in big and small ways, it powerfully elevates our lives. I hope these stories connect with you and encourage you to embrace bravery in every possible way, day after day. Together, we can build a movement of courageous living that enriches both our lives and our communities. And if you enjoy the show, I ask you to please share it with others. Maybe think of someone who you want to choose bravely right alongside you. Thanks for tuning in. Now here's the show.
Oh, y'all, today I'm really excited to be talking to the amazing Ronit Plank. Ronit is a writer and a fellow podcaster, but she's also a little girl who was abandoned by her mother at the age of 6. And then she became a surrogate caregiver for the rest of her family. And grappling with this and understanding her own self-worth has become a life goal. Her story is one of resilience and eventually reconciliation. Rejection from the most important person in her life ultimately led to a deep commitment and love for her own children and helping other people overcome obstacles like this. Ronit is a friend of mine, and I'm so excited to have you here. Welcome to the Brave Files.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here, Heather. I've been really looking forward to it, and it's so exciting because you're one of the first podcasts I ever encountered when I began podcasting myself.
Yay. Thank you. It's fun. Well, that's it. I was going to say this much later, but I had the privilege of being a guest on your show. It feels like a long time ago now.
I know. I don't even think it was a year ago, but you were on episode 47, which yes. I titled A Coming Out and Into Power Story. And I just love talking with you. You had a story that I had not had on the podcast yet. And I was so glad that you were my guest.
Oh, thank you. Yay. Well, I'm glad that we're turning the tables now and I get to have you here with us. So let's start at the beginning. We all know, because I just said that your mom left when you were only 6. And I'm curious, before that, do you remember what life was like before that? Are your memories strong? Because I don't have any memories of being little. So
yeah,
I'd love to hear what it was like before the bottom fell out there.
Yeah. So, for me, it was a very different experience because I was born in Israel. My parents are American. They're New York Jews, and they went to Israel to make Aliyah, which is basically like becoming a citizen and making your life in Israel. And it's sort of a goal of a lot of Jews. And this was in the late 60s and 70s when there's a lot of idealism going along. And, they kind of dropped out of American culture for those 8 years. And so they had me and my sister. She's about 2.5 years younger. And, my first 4 years were on this communal work farm called a kibbutz, which it was in the south of Israel in Beersheba, near the Negev desert. And it was everyone collectively worked and everyone had a small place to live, and the children were raised in a children's house. We didn't even sleep with our parents after 6 weeks. Yeah. And so I I basically saw my parents 2 or 3 hours a day, every afternoon on the lawn, along with the other children. And that was supposed to be dedicated time for parent visits. And you otherwise were taken care of by women, carers who lived in the house and slept there with you and your group of kids the same age. And so it's hard to piece apart what are my actual memories. Yeah, I know you want to dig in, but it's hard to answer. I know you're like, let's go. Yeah. Well, it's hard to piece apart what are my original memories and what come from photos that I've spent my whole life looking at. But I will tell you, it seems that I was confident. I was free. I felt supported. I knew where everyone was. I understood what my role was. I was a bona fide kid, and my parents were there. But in some sense, I mean, I adored them, but they were more dispensable because there were so many other people around. And so when we moved to Seattle when I was about 4, and then things started falling apart, they got divorced about when I was 4.5 or 5, the cracks just started getting, bigger and deeper. And not only was I moved from this kind of cradle of a society where I'd grown up and a language, Hebrew, that I knew, I also found myself dependent entirely on 2 people who were falling apart and who didn't really know how to parent on their own without a whole group.
Yeah. That's what I'm sitting here thinking. I'm like, oh my God, they didn't know how to take care of you. They didn't know how to be parents. Mm-hmm. Whoa. Okay. Wow. This is now. I feel like I knew a lot about you, but I somehow did not know this.
Yeah.
What is the purpose of a community like that? And I can hear it almost sounds like the universe in some bizarre way had your back a little in prepping you for not having a present parent. Like,
that's a good way of thinking about it. So this was a socialist communal work farm, and each kibbutz had a job. Some were factories, some were farming. My mom worked in the kitchen, my dad worked in the fields and then with the animals. And the idea was to be really productive and to support each other and to not have to worry about paying for things or having disparity in economic levels.
Okay, but why not care for your children? At least at night. I can see during the day.
Okay.
Of course, I understand daycare, but
sure.
But why not? Yeah.
Okay. So to speak to what I do understand about it was to free up both the women and the men to make it equal. So the idea was, on the side of the fathers, my dad told me that they believed on the kibbutz that the dads on the kibbutz got to see their children far more than dads who worked in the city because they had this bona fide couple of hours every day. The idea was to free up the moms so there was more of like gender equality so that the moms weren't stuck at home raising children. Now, I'm sure there have been a lot of books published in Israel about this. And I've mentioned this on other shows before, but I will say that when we went back as a family, me and my husband and my 2 children, about 2 or 3 years ago, we had one tour guide who was telling us about kibbutzim, which is plural for kibbutz, and the kibbutzniks, which are the people who live on the kibbutz. And he said, no offense, basically, in his broken English, but they all need a little bit of therapy.
Right.
Because when you think about attachment, which I didn't know much about until I was a mom myself, think about all the attachment repercussions for not being able to sleep near your parents.
Huge abandonment issues.
Yeah.
Huge. I mean, I can appreciate understanding or wanting to change that gender equality. I can certainly appreciate that. But yes. Yeah. Like caregiving for, I feel like there might be some other ways to do that. Although this is,
People are really surprised by that part of the story. I grew up hearing these stories my whole life about how, in a way, idyllic the kibbutz was. My father always reminisced about it. And I never really stopped and thought about it on my own terms as the person I am now until the last 5 or 7 years and writing the book and stuff where I was like, wait a minute, and also had my own children.
Yeah. Can you imagine not ever caring for your children? Holy shit.
Not totally. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, my gosh. Okay. Well, so then what prompted the move to the States? Why did they leave it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think what I hear from both of them, and, their memory is fuzzy. And also, I think as a memoirist and as just a writer, I've noticed how much our memory is faulty. Like you think that you know something down to the bones, but if you check it with somebody else, they'll have a different memory, right?
Absolutely.
So it's very, very changeable and malleable. But the idea is that they talked back and forth about going back a lot. And they did leave at one point before I was born, tried to settle in Brooklyn, came back. back. They just didn't know what they were doing. I mean, she was 20 when they got married, and she was 24 when she had me, which is, not that young by those standards, but still young. And, a side note too is that both of them came from childhoods and families that were distressed and not supportive, which is not too uncommon, especially back in the day. But they really didn't have a blueprint. And so I think they decided to come back to the States because he got a position in the grad school at University of Washington. He was going to finish his English degree and teach, and they settled on Seattle. And I think it was hard because my mom was a really social woman. She relied on that community. And, it was really difficult of a transition when they came back.
Yeah, I imagine it's very challenging. And it also isn't surprising to hear that they were craving something, some structure, some guidance.
Well, I think also, so my dad will always reminisce even to this day about how amazing the kibbutz was. And we'll all kind of look at him and say, you never really liked it that much. I think he wanted to tame the land and be this Jewish pioneer. But I think my mom will tell me that socially and the crowds and the rules and the equal ground that the kibbutz expected of everyone didn't appeal to him. Whereas my mom was out almost every night doing sketch and improv and playing, hanging out with friends. Like, it was her milieu.
Yeah. Well, and it really isn't any wonder that she was seeking some sort of version of that and could not cope, right? So share with everybody why she left and where she went.
Okay, so and this is in the book, and so I'll give you the Cliff's Notes, but basically this is another part of the story that, and I think people who have unpacked their childhoods will appreciate this. My whole life I felt that the story was my mom left, period. My dad would talk about it. But actually, here is the bombshell. He left first because he left the family first to move to New Jersey and left me and my sister and my mom in Seattle. And he moved out there for a job and to live with a woman and her 2 daughters and basically start this other family.
Shit.
Yeah. So then like a year later, he's gone. She has no real resources, no family. We're on food stamps. She didn't even know how to write a check. And she's raising us, doing her best, feeling sick or depressed or maybe dealing with fibromyalgia. We don't know. And her friend says, hey, you should really look at this teacher. His name is Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh. She starts listening to tapes. She starts reading his books. She starts bringing us to meditations with a lot of other adults. And, she's gone very inward. She's not accessible. She doesn't seem happy. She's angry and she's alone. And this becomes sort of a resource for her. And Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh is the guru that the Wild Wild Country docuseries on Netflix was about.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Cool. I mean, terrible, but interesting. I don't know.
Strange.
It is odd. And he taught that children were a hindrance, right?
Yes.
Like you don't want your kids around.
And I didn't know that at the time, but he was also known, Heather, I don't know if you know this, but it wasn't until I was in counseling later in years that I found out he was known as the sex guru.
Oh, of course.
Did you know that?
Ugh, no, but what? Of course. It's not surprising.
And I do go into a little bit of history in my book, but and I'll save the listeners too much of the detail because I don't want to get too stuck in it. But essentially, Bhagwan encouraged sterilization and vasectomy.
So fucked up.
Yeah. You know what I always think about? If he really had everyone do that, how would he have new followers? Like, what was the plan?
Right? You're all going to die out, mister.
And also, this is another funny thing, too. Funny, strange, so sad and weird. Toward the end of his time in his second ashram, which was in Antelope, Oregon, he sat in a literal dentist chair on stage and sucked nitrous oxide while he lectured.
So, It's always
96 Rolls Royces, yeah.
To me, well, right? Those things together, right? The eccentric, they're wealthy. The people who blindly follow people like that, I
but
guess.
You know what?
Yeah.
I'm interrupting you. This is a funny thing. And I didn't get into it too much. I don't talk about it too much because I don't have the energy to unpack it. But I think that I said unpack before, so excuse my redundance. But he would say, I have these 96 Rolls Royces because I'm trying to basically mock and highlight how ridiculous Western culture is.
Lies. Lies. Yeah. I personally cannot understand that level of blind faith in something that just feels so obviously fake and fucked up from my perspective. But from all of the, 170 people I've had on this show, and there have been a lot of people who have certainly not your story, but some experience with cults or some experience with things like that. What I hear pretty consistently is the folks who fall into that are just craving something to love them and something to be theirs and maybe some structure and some guidance. Tell me what to do, because I wonder for your mom, and of course it's her story and not yours, but this, just tell me what to do because I don't know how to do this.
Yeah, I mean, and of course, if you've never been parented properly, which was the case for her,
And you.
Yes, of course. Like, so the thing is, she was given a lot of responsibility as a kid. She was she was the middle child, but the first girl. She took care of a lot of stuff. Her mom was verbally and I think physically abusive, and she did so much and got very little anything physical or emotional back. And her mom never told her she loved her. I don't think her mom ever gave her a hug, actually.
Oh, that's heartbreaking.
Yes. And so then you've got this woman who is trying to create a life with somebody else who never got any kind of nurturing. And then she was put in charge of a lot of things. And then I kind of followed in her footsteps because once she was gone, I ended up taking care of my sister and my father's household. And,
At the age of 6.
Very early. Well, yeah, by the time, so cut to basically, and you can stop me and have me go back if you want, but my mom dropped us off in New Jersey with my father on the way to go to India. And my father and me and my sister and his girlfriend and her 2 daughters who were teenagers lived together for about a year. It was only supposed to be the summer, but then my mom basically said, I'm not coming back. And so I stayed there for 2nd grade. And then my dad ended up moving me and my sister out to Queens, Flushing, Queens, for an apartment, just the 3 of us, because my mom had come back for her mom who was sick with cancer, but she wasn't ready to take us. And so my dad started our new life of 3 in Flushing, Queens. And, my dad was great that way because he really wanted us to feel that he wanted us and that he loved us, and it was the 3 of us against the world. But it didn't end up being perfect, of course,
No.
and
All of that is, I have a 2nd grader right now.
Wow.
She's my youngest. She's the youngest of 4. So she is the epitome of the baby of the family. And when I think of how little she is,
right,
how young and tiny, she's also clever and smart and brilliant, but to imagine a 2nd grader taking on that level of responsibility. And did you feel consciously aware at that time of being unwanted or abandoned?
So that is a good question because I think that, and I identified this a lot in writing the book because, you have this, as I mentioned before, you have the story or you think is accurate. And then as time goes by, you can go back and figure out, is this really true? What do I think about this? And that's part of the joy and also the pain of writing memoir. But I think that for me, I just went ahead with it. What was I supposed to do? When you're a kid, unless you have a total breakdown and collapse, which I'm sure happens, first of all, I was a pretty precocious and strong, like I had a lot of resilience as a kid. I was not a gushy person necessarily. And so I just assumed I was supposed to do all this. There was no question. And I did wait for my mom to call from India when she said she would and she didn't. I did wait for her. I was waiting for her to come back because for me, she was she was the mothership, she was. And so my whole those early years was defined by waiting for her to come back. And I thought things would continue. If you had told me at 2nd grade and then 3rd grade when we moved to Queens together that what was going to unfold over the next years, I don't know what I would have been able to handle because luckily you don't know what's about to happen in your life. But
you just deal with the here and now.
Yeah, I missed her. But for the first couple of years with my dad, I was still really young and it was fun. It was an adventure. We were in a holding pattern. But when I started getting into adolescence and I'd been the mother of the house and the partner for too long and his boundaries weren't so great, I really started to cringe and back away from that role.
Of course. Now, when you say his boundaries weren't so great, What are you saying?
Well, nothing physical ever happened between me and my father, but I feel that his conversation with me crossed a line sometimes, and he depended on me for a lot of things, like cooking dinner and cleaning and taking care of my sister. And sometimes he would, kind of talk to me about his relationships, and, he would comment on women that he saw on the TV. And, it was just very, very, masculine
Sexist.
and very
Sounds
sexist.
like, yeah.
Very sexist. And, it was just a very male-centered way to grow up, of course, right? And for the first couple of years, it was fine. It was dad and us against the world, as I said. But then, he became the parent that was always there, and my mom became the absent parent, which was the gift parent. So we wanted to see her. I wanted to be with her. And I offered her so much forgiveness because we did start to see her on the weekends for a while before she left again. And being with her was what I wanted, right? She was where I felt the most comfortable, I thought. But in writing the book, I realized, that was troublesome too, because she was not always there.
Of course.
Emotionally.
Of course. So if when you look back on all of this, what do you think really was your safe place? Was it just you? Was it your
That's
sister?
a good question. I think that probably changed through the years. My mind was probably my safe place. My need to try to kind of figure things out and work them out in my head. I became sort of C-3PO in my need to rationalize and figure things out. And I think I did some magical thinking. I did some tapping in threes. I wouldn't say I had OCD, but I'd brush my teeth extra long, like too long, 10 minutes at a time. I'd like tap,
Control.
tap. Yeah, control for sure. And also animals became a place where I could really express myself.
yeah.
We had a lot of animals, lots of cats and dog. And, I honestly, I don't know that I was present very much. I think I was always ahead in my head trying to figure out how to feel better.
Is that something you've been able to change in your adult life? Are you able to be more present now, or is that still a struggle?
It's so much better. And I think that, I went through different therapists as I got older, and I don't think I started working in the best possible way until about 5 years ago. And that therapist also helped me with some Lexapro. and I'm not ashamed or shy about that, because look, I have an anxious situation. I have a little bit of anxious relationship stuff happening and who knows how much is nature, who knows how much is nurture. And as I've talked to some of my fellow Jewish women friends, especially in the older generation, some of them say we've had so much inbreeding that we're just anxious and neurotic anyway.
Well, and that stuff is passed down anthropologically. So
Yeah. So, it's not a surprise. I'm neurotypical as far as I know, but I definitely think that I have struggled with relational anxiety, and that Lexapro has helped me take the edge off, plus some very, very deep and hearty work by myself, like really, really coming to the table, and with my husband, because we were both sort of lost, and we had to make a decision about 8 or 9 years ago about whether we were going to blow this whole thing up or dig in. And we dug in, and I had to face all the stuff that I didn't want to face about myself.
Yeah, man, that's it. It's really fascinating to hear you say that, this unusual position I'm in with one of my daughters who has experienced some trauma of her own, and she's in this phase, and I'm curious to hear from you how you relate to this, where she is just super fucking pissed off that because of somebody else's actions, she has to heal.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I can speak to this especially because, and I don't know if this will answer your question because she's still young, but for me, I think I had this idea, it was like implicit in me, that maybe because I'd been the victim in my family and I'd been through so much, and I really want to be clear, I didn't think this aloud or say it to anyone. I think I operated this way. I felt that I was the good guy. Hey, I went through all this stuff. I'm the good guy, perhaps. And that maybe I'd already done so much work that I didn't have to do any more work, right? But I was defensive, and I didn't really know how to be vulnerable. And I know vulnerable is a hot button word these days, or for the last couple of years.
It's a good one, though.
But it's really good. and And it so is true. It was a revelation to learn that vulnerability is strength. And I have to stay on top of it because my easy comebacks are defensive.
Yeah.
And I could again say, well, I've already done the work, so I don't need to be more vulnerable. But I need to settle myself down, sit myself down, and like put my little falcon hood on and just be like, shh, shush up. What's really going on here? And let's figure this out. Because that little scared bunny rabbit part of you wants to just jump and get away, right?
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I really think there's something to that. When we feel the most need to be defensive and protective is always the time to sit within yourself and get into your knowing and go, wait, what's actually happening? But that is, of course, a very mature approach. And I don't expect my kiddo to be the one to figure that out yet.
Yeah.
And I kind of just say to her, so for anybody listening, you get to be really mad that you have to heal because somebody else did something shitty. You can be mad about that. It doesn't change the fact that you have to do the healing, but you're not going to do it until you're ready to do it. And I wonder, for you, was that when you decided to write your memoir? Like, it's time to heal. And
So, and I also want to, you just reminded me of something when you said that, and that this might be helpful to your daughter, though she may already know this, which part of the healing for me it was sort of a multi-pronged thing, but part of it happened when I realized this didn't have anything to do with me. And that took a really, really long time because you could think, well, if I was a different kid or if I had done something different, that was my early belief, right? Then maybe my mom wouldn't have left. That was my early belief, which is absurd as a mom, to think that. Like now that I'm a mom, absurd. Although maybe there are some people who would take off if their kid was really hard. I get that. But, as a mom, you're supposed to stay. And so if your mom can't stay, what does that mean? And so for me, writing the book, what happened was I used to act. I was an actor first and a marketer. I used to sell and act. That's what I did. And then I taught. And then I started writing when my second child was born, my boy. And I started writing fiction. I took some classes at the University of Washington. I started publishing short fiction. But a lot of these stories, which will be out next year in a different book, they had this idea of alienation, losing power, not knowing where you belong, loneliness in them. Not to say a lot of other fiction doesn't have that, because fiction writers, we work on this stuff a lot. But then I realized, I am really trying to say something. And so some nonfiction essays started popping out. I switched to nonfiction and some of these essays started popping out and I started publishing nonfiction and memoir essays. But I still felt memoir was sort of like a dirty word. I felt memoir was navel gazing. I felt it was sort of self-congratulatory and kind of wallowing. And then I went to grad school and I switched to memoir and I understood it as something totally different and that it is a search for the memoirist to figure out why they behaved the way they did, when they did, and what they think about it now. And I drafted the full manuscript probably in 2016 and then worked on it and revised it over the years. And goodness, I got the publishing deal a year ago. So it takes a long time. And again, if you had told me in 2016 that I wouldn't have the book out till 2021, I'd be like, forget it, I'm out. I'm very impatient.
Absolutely. That is a long time. It's also hard to write a book, any book, and it's really hard to write a memoir. And it's essentially like sort of turning yourself inside out in the name of healing and growing for yourself and then helping others do the same, right? I feel like otherwise, why do we tell our stories?
Yes. And I think that a lot of people will say that one of the main reasons they write is, well, of course, to excavate it for themselves, but also there's this knowing that if it helps somebody else feel less alone or helps somebody feel seen, then it's very worth it.
Absolutely. Well, go ahead and tell everybody, because we've talked about the book, what the name of the book is, where they can get the book.
Yeah. So the book is called When She Comes Back, and it's available wherever you get your books. Of course, you can get it at my website. There's ronitplank.com, and I know you'll tag all that. But my book is available in all the big stores and all the tiny stores. And if your little store doesn't have it, you can just say, can you please get that?
Yeah, I love ordering from my independent bookstore. They can get you anything you want. Shout out to the book table.
Yes, and I should mention it's in Kindle audiobook, which I narrated, and it's on hardback and also paperback.
Oh my gosh, I love that you just said that. So one of our show sponsors is Libro.fm, which is a competitor of Audible. And so when you get an audiobook from Libro.fm, and if you want a free one, I was not intending to plug this now, but if you want a free one, go to vickeryandco.com/LibroFM and you'll get a free book. You could get Ronit's audiobook there. I love listening to memoirs on audio. That's almost the only thing I listen to on audio.
Oh, wow.
So I'm going to go right and get it right
Yes,
now.
and I promise I didn't produce it myself. I had somebody else produce it, so it's actually
be
directed
bad
and produced. Well, I just
if you
think
produce it yourself.
I'm a very quick talker, and I think that I would have. What did she say when we were recording? She had to stop me several times because she said, "You just went off the mountain. You just fell off the mountain," because you're like, and then I went to the store, and then before you know it, you've like speeded up the entire delivery.
Well, my love, I think you need to stop apologizing for yourself.
Thank you.
Just a little tiny thing I'll throw out there because I think you're amazing. And one of the questions that I have for you, first of all, congratulations on the book.
Thank
And an
you.
audiobook, it's a lot of work. It's exceptional. And also, you are one of the very few people that I know who didn't self-publish.
Yeah, I guess a lot of people do self-publish. And I am friends with a whole bunch of writers right now. And I do have a small publisher. Motina Books took this on. And I'm just so glad it's out in the world now. And it was important for me to narrate it because I do have some of that experience behind me in terms of voiceover and stuff. And I felt like maybe people would like to listen to it. It's only 6 hours of listening.
I am going to listen to it.
Yeah,
I'm
thank
going to
you.
get it as soon as we're done.
Oh,
So
I
love
hope. And
listening to
please,
it.
then you'll have to tell me what you think of it. I'm so curious.
Of course, I know I'm going to love it. I love you. I love your show. I love your energy.
Thank you.
I'm super excited about it. I've clearly, I think your story is fascinating. One of the questions that I have for you is, how has your childhood experience shaped the type of parent that you are? I know you are a very different type of parent than your parents were. And so how has that shifted? And what's the level of consciousness there?
I think there was a lot of consciousness about it early on because everything I did would recall, as the kids got older, I could remember the times that I was their age. And so I had a lot of, frustration and anger at my mom when the kids were 4 and 5 and 6, as you can imagine. But I am very careful about boundaries, which I think comes from the father side.
Yeah.
Trying to make sure they don't feel that I'm parentifying them or leaning on them or objectifying them or any of that. I'm careful with what I share with them. I try to make sure that my husband is my partner and they are my children.
Yes.
So that might also become me kind of really like taking too solicitous care of them sometimes. So if my 15-and-a-half-year-old daughter shouts from her room, "Can I have some fruit, Mom?" I'm like, "Okay, honey." And I cut it up and I bring it to her because fruit is love, food is love. And of course I'm going to give them food and take care of them, even though my husband says sometimes, like even 2 years ago when my 13-and-a-half-year-old was 11-and-a-half, he said, "You don't have to tie his shoes, honey."
It's true. Overcompensating.
Because he had his hands full and I did it. He's like, "Oh my gosh, you baby that boy." But it's funny. And then the other thing I would say is that I always try to make sure they know how much I love them. And I think that the fact that my daughter sasses me a lot and my son gets to be a little snappy these days means, I think, they know I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Because when I was
what a great way to think of that for all of you who are fucking frustrated with your kids who don't listen or they snap back or they push back. It's really, truly is a sign that they feel safe and comfortable.
I would never have done that with either of my parents. I didn't want to piss off my father as a teenager because then who would I live with? And I didn't see my mom in any kind of way but idolized. So I never would have ever done that. And so I didn't start snapping back at my mom until I was like in my 30s.
Wow.
When I felt safe.
Well, right, because she couldn't hurt you anymore.
Yes.
She didn't have any control anymore. What's your relationship like with your family now, your parents, your sister? We haven't really talked about, are you close with your sister?
Yes, very close with my sister. She lives in California and she has 2 sons. She's a great mom and we talk as much as we can. My father and mother come over every Friday night. Your audience won't believe this, for Shabbat dinner, which is a Jewish Sabbath dinner.
Together? They come together?
Yes. My mom cooks. My mom, stop it. It's in the book, I swear. My mom comes over and she brings groceries. Like we gave her a card yard, buy these groceries. She makes dinner for us, and delicious cook. She was a cook on the kibbutz, and she's an amazing cook. And my mom and I, our relationship, which we didn't talk about this, but we've gotten a lot closer because we both kind of got to this point of real honesty. And she sort of really accepted the responsibility for things, which is great. My father used to go back and forth from New York to Seattle a lot, but now he's been here since the pandemic. And so we see them at least once a week. And I'll tell you, like clockwork, my father will bring up the kibbutz days. And I swear we should just play a drinking game about it, because we could be rich every time if we just kind of bet on when he's going to bring up the kibbutz. Every Friday. And my mom, she'll say, you didn't even like the kibbutz. What are you talking about?
It does go to show that when we take the time to heal ourselves and then get honest and have hard conversations, the absolutely seemingly impossible becomes possible.
It's true. And, I never was fully estranged from my mother, but our relationship deepened in the last few years, and we've had some serious conversations. She hasn't run away, and that is part of the watershed moment. That's part of what enabled the healing to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Has she apologized?
I feel like I should leave that as a cliffhanger for people to find in the book. Wouldn't that be smart?
Do you answer that question in the book?
Yes.
All right, folks. Ronit's not going to give you the answer. I mean, I think I'm gonna guess she has. I think it's pretty hard to heal and to welcome and to trust when somebody can't ever admit that their form of fault. But also, that's deeply partnered with, and you said this at the very beginning of the conversation, when you shift the narrative from I was abandoned by my mother to my mother is also a human being who was experiencing these things. When we stop making it all about us, even though it happened to us and we feel it about us, and we start to go, wait, there are other factors at play. And if I can be a little bit empathetic to somebody else's experience, then maybe I don't have to feel so bad about it.
It's true. And that's part of where I spent a lot of time in the book. And what changed the most over the drafts was my ability to maybe go in and think about my parents and their history and try to really illustrate who they were back then, so that they weren't just these ideas or characters. So you really get a sense of what they were like early on.
Well, I appreciate that. It's important to do that, I think.
It's important, not to villainize, people in your memoir.
Right. And memoirs are our stories. They're not other people's stories. So that's also quite a challenge to experience and to go through. I love it. Really quickly, your podcast is called And Then Everything Changed. And we mentioned that. I was on episode 47, which was really a lot of fun to do. I'm curious to know why you started the podcast and then what you're seeing as a result of having those powerful stories of change out into the world.
Yeah. So thanks for asking that. I feel that when I first started the podcast, I had this idea from the writerly position of, these pivotal moments in a book or in a movie script where everything kind of happens and hinges, and then the whole rest of the narrative comes out of that. So I had that angle, but I also had this idea that I have seen change in my life. And I know that, people talk a lot about resilience, and they talk about empathy, and they talk about vulnerability. And it's hard to kind of take away the labels and really, really dig in and think about what that is. But in my life, I've learned that there are people who have withstood so many hard and difficult things, but they don't come out at the rest of the world from anger or a lashing out. They are able to take what happened to them and move in the world from a place of, I made it through that, and I'm open, and I understand who I am, and I'm receptive to change. And so I think that for me, starting the podcast was a way to understand how people make it through really hard times in their life. And my stories have been about abusive families. They've been about addiction. They've covered a lot of things, like for you, your coming out story and losing your, the first marriage. There's stories of people who grew up in cults. There's, but they made it out, and they wrote books about it, and they were trying to spread the word. People who I feel like believe in our better angels, and I feel like listening to these stories will hopefully, it's painful sometimes and they're hard, but I choose stories from people who have insight into what happened and are open and are willing to travel back to that time and figure out what was going on, because it's sort of a reflection of what happened to me, right? My book is so different than it would have been 10 years ago because of work that I've done.
Yeah.
But I think that putting this kind of stuff into the world, putting these stories into the world will hopefully kind of feed off of itself and inspire people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it does. And our shows are very complementary to one another. And I love that. So if you like the Brave Files, you will like And Then Everything Changed.
Thank you.
So go check it out. But I mean, look at you. Just in the last few minutes, the last less than 40 minutes, you've shared wild, tremendous growth and success is in building a life that you want and that you love. Reconnecting with your parents. I mean, this healthy, like I literally can't even imagine having my parents show up every Friday for dinner. I don't even know that I want to.
Heather, I'll admit that sometimes I hide for a few minutes.
I can't believe you. But it's wonderful for your children too. I mean, there's so many wonderful things. And writing a book that took years to get done and this amazing podcast. And so there's so much to celebrate. And I'm curious for you, Ronit, how do you celebrate?
You know, I thought about this question because I knew you were going to ask it. And I thought, I feel like it's so many ways, right? You could say, well, I'm going to go out with my friends and have dinner. But really what I love to do is I love to just do nothing because I feel like I'm always doing stuff. I'm a mom, I'm a parent, people listening know that, how hard that is. And honestly, sometimes sitting on the couch with my husband and opening a bag of some kind of cheesy snack. And like having a martini makes me so happy.
That's a wonderful way to celebrate. And that's why I love this question, because there's never any judgment attached to it. Whatever it is that you want. Sometimes I celebrate by walking away from all of my people who I love dearly. And I want to be alone, and sit on the porch or whatever. There are all sorts of different ways to celebrate. And I ask this question so that we can lean more into that. What are these ways that we can acknowledge our growth and the moments that make us stronger and healthier and better and get us to where we want to go so that we can do more of that, have more of those moments. So yay, I love it. Ronit, will you share your favorite charitable organization with us?
Yes, I'm going to give you two. The main one is Planned Parenthood, which I think most people know about. Yeah. Yep. And the second one is one we found when my daughter was getting her bat mitzvah and we wanted to donate some money. And it's Soy Dog Foundation, which is SOI. And they basically help rescue dogs who are on the streets in Thailand. So, that's a nice specialized organization we've donated to.
I love that. So they will be our charity of the week, folks. Go check them out. Give what you can, time, money, shares, whatever it is. Ronit, will you give us your 3 words one last time?
Yes. Hope, change, courage.
Yeah, they're beautiful words. And you're a beautiful soul. I love your energy. And you have an incredible laugh. And I'm just so grateful that you chose to come and spend a little bit of time here with me and my listeners. Thank you.
Oh, Heather, thank you so much. I'm so happy we did this.
Me too. All right, folks, I'm excited to hear what opened up for you with this conversation. What are you thinking more deeply about? In what ways do you want to lean into your own brave journey? And let me know. Give me a call. Share your thoughts at 312-646-0205. I check all of those voicemails myself. You can email me as well, heather@vickeryandco.com. I promise to actually get back to you. How about that? Nothing makes me happier than seeing a new positive review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you enjoyed this show, would you please just take a quick moment to subscribe, rate, and review it, and maybe share it with someone else? That would mean the world to me. It's such a pleasure to spend time with you every single week. I thank you for being here, for being a supporter and a listener, and I am grateful that I get to be a small part of your brave journey. So for today, and until we talk again, this is Heather Vickery reminding you to go out today and every day and choose bravely. Hey friends, I want to share something really exciting with you. We already know you enjoy listening to podcasts because you're listening to this one, but I'm also betting you enjoy audiobooks. And hey, listen, if you don't already enjoy audiobooks, then it's time to check them out. That's why I'm really excited to share Libro.fm with you. They are an incredible new platform for listening to audiobooks. And by choosing Libro.fm over other audiobook services, you are supporting a local bookstore of your choice and investing in your local community. Libro.fm offers over 150,000 audiobooks via their primary platform, which, by the way, they built with love and from scratch because they're a small business also. They even offer bookseller recommendations for great audiobook options. You can sign up right now via www.vickeryandco.com/LibroFM. That's vickeryandco.com/LIBROFM. And when you do, you'll get one free audiobook of your choice, and the proceeds will go to your favorite local bookstore. Now, check what I just said there. You're going to get a free book, and the proceeds are still going to go to your local bookstore because Libro.fm makes sure that their booksellers get paid even when they give a promo to customers. I've listened to over 20 audiobooks this year alone. I especially love listening to memoirs read by the author, and it feels great knowing that all of my purchases support my local bookstore, The Book Table, in Oak Park, Illinois. Libro.fm. The same audiobooks, the same price, but a completely different story. Check them out right now at vickeryandco.com/LibroFM. Have you ever thought about starting a podcast? Maybe you've had this thought and then quickly shut it down because who has the time? Or you don't know how, or gosh, it just all seems too hard. If you have something to share with the world, we want to encourage you to get your message out. The world needs to hear it. Did you know that 50% of all homes are podcast fans? If you've ever wondered about having your own podcast or how it can increase your business or get your message across, then please join me and the other experts from the Podcast Power Academy for our monthly free Q&A session. It's called So You Want to Start a Podcast? This casual live conversation will help you understand how podcasting can be a great decision, why now is the best time to get started, and how to get into action with it. Visit podcastpoweracademy.com to learn more. You've been listening to The Brave Files, stories of people living courageously. To learn more about the show, find our show notes and full episode transcripts, or to get some great bonus content, visit thebravefilespodcast.com. And we would love to know what you think of the show. You can give us a call at 312-646-0205. Let us know your thoughts on the episode, the show in general, or maybe share with us how you're out choosing bravely. This episode is brought to you by Vickery & Co. Success Coaching. Coaching that helps you maintain a life well lived and a business well run. Learn more at vickeryandco.com. Our music was created and produced in a custom collaboration with Matt Lewis from ML Creative Consulting, a boutique firm dedicated to helping clients identify their unique sound and amplify their brand with custom delivered soundtracks. We couldn't do any of this without our extraordinary audio engineer, Andrew Olson. Learn more about him and check out his work at findandrewolson.com. And special thanks to everyone on Team Brave, from our producers, associate producers, copy editors, writers, and support team. Special thanks to Molly, Mary, Kim, Sabra, and Sabrina. I'm your host and executive producer, Heather Vickery. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next week.